Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash. This is HeroQuest, and today we're going to be looking at MEGAQuest. But we've already looked at MEGAQuest, so we're going to be looking at MEGAQuest 2.0. That's right, the creator of MEGAQuest, Deathtone, has polished up, resized, and added on to his MEGAQuest homebrew system, which is perfectly compatible with HeroQuest. And we're going to take a look at those changes today. Our very first card that we can actually see besides the Drive-Thru RPG Manifest card is already immediately useful, with QR codes to allow us to stay up on the new releases of MEGAQuest by joining the Discord server, or a link to download the most up-to-date rules. Go ahead, scan them, there you go, you're welcome. Being a Drive-Thru RPG product, this does come with a Manifest card, which we can safely sell on eBay. And we are immediately greeted with the spell deck, the skill deck, and the hero cards. There are 15 hero cards, 10 skill cards, and 20 spell cards. We'll take a look at this as if it's a new product, brand new, and then we'll compare it with the old version of the MEGAQuest system to see what improvements have been made. Each hero card is double-sided so that you can keep track of your stats on one side and the history of your character on the other, and outlines that character's race, class, basic stats like attack, defend, body, and mind, disciplines like mental, luck, acrobatics, faith, brawn, and ritual, their unique trait, their profile art, and flavor text about this particular hero. For the backside of the hero card, we have a place for skills, gold, XP, spells, and inventory. And for the hero cards, we have the Hunter Orc, the Shaman Orc, the Bladeward Orc, Blade Ward. Men, we're traveling Bladeward. But what direction is that? Pointy end towards the enemy. Wah! This is a Blade Ward. The Human Blade Master, the Human Merchant, the Human Commander, the Halfling Thief, the Halfling Researcher, the Halfling Engineer, the Elf Rogue, the Elf Mage, the Elf Druid, the Dwarf Stonewall, the Dwarf Blacksmith, and the Dwarf Berserker. If we ever see a sort of sequel to the MEGAQuest system, not an upgrade, but a second part, I think it would be really cool to see the ogres included in the races. True, we don't have any ogre heroes in the base game of HeroQuest, but we do have the ability now to hire an ogre mercenary, and that just begs to be tampered with. All right, let's take a look at the skills. Each skill has a name, a description, and then what happens if you want to modify this skill. Skills and spells in MEGAQuest can be modified with the 6 disciplines that are on your hero card. For example, Whirlwind is a base skill, where you will roll an attack for all enemies within one space of the hero. Subtract 1 attack dice after rolling for each target until you are out of targets or the hero's attack dice equals 0. The hero decides who the first target is. To illustrate this attack, we're going to use my Warhammer Silver Tower mini against 2 HeroQuest orcs and the Heroine orc from OrcQuest. Now, let's say our hero here is somebody who has the ability to roll 2 attack dice, and don't worry about my black attack dice. He's going to roll both of them against this first character when using the Whirlwind attack, and that's 1 skull against which this orc will defend, and did not defend successfully, so with the stats of a normal orc, that would take this orc out of the game. Then that sword would go immediately into the next enemy, where we would roll for attack again, but using 1 die less. I rolled both die by accident. Both dice. That's a defend die, so nothing happens there. Moving on to the third enemy, we roll nothing because we've gradually decreased the amount of dice that we rolled until we got to 0. A pretty useful attack and also pretty well balanced. I mean, your chances of hitting the enemies are greatly diminished with each successive enemy, but the chance is still there for you to do some serious damage or kill the enemy. It's a really good interpretation of the Whirlwind attack that I've seen so many different variations of. However, it can be modified, and if you use the Brawn modification, if target has 1 health, that target doesn't roll a defense roll. This actually transforms the skill in such a way that our orc enemies who only have 1 body point to begin with would not be able to defend against this attack. That's modifying the attack to suit the character, to suit the player's playstyle of that character. And that is something that I very much applaud. That's me very much applauding. I like that a lot. Now, if your character is more faith-based, you can use the faith modification. If a target dies from Whirlwind, +1 defend dice until the start of the player's next turn. So we killed 1 of the targets, and we will now be able to roll an extra defend dice until the beginning of my next turn, which means any monsters who attack me will have less of a chance to actually wound me. Also, The person who sold me the Silver Tower game told me that this miniature wasn't painted very well, and I have to highly disagree. I love the paint job on this miniature. Back to MEGAQuest. Besides Whirlwind, we have Taunt, we have Sprint, we have Rage, we have Maneuver, we have Leap, we have Hide, we have Empowered Kick, we have Charge, and we have Bash. Moving on to the spells, they work the same way. For example, the base spell version of Water Lock. The caster surrounds the target with water, incapacitating the target. Target rolls Mind. If a skull is thrown, target is immobilized for 1 turn. Black Shield, target is immobilized for 3 turns. If they damage the bubble, they break free. And if you apply the mental modification to this, the caster may cast a second Water Lock on a second target. Really like this sort of skill tree system, almost. Anyway, for spells, we have Water Lock, Water Elemental, Tidal Wave, Ice Bolt, Target Heal, Resurrect, Holy Light, Group Heal, Flame Orb, Fireball, Fire Nova, Fire Elemental, Stone Punch, Shockwave, Earth Elemental, Crumble, Summon Undead, Skull Bolt, Bone Shield, and Blood Siphon. Loving those dark abilities. But I've been very much looking forward to comparing these decks, the old versus the new. I've heard that some of the typeface has been embiggened, and that was one of my complaints about the old edition. So I'd like to see where these improvements are. And for those of you who are on the fence about committing to get this particular deck of cards, this homebrew, perhaps these changes will be the thing that sways you. So first impressions, the back of the card art is changed. The front of the card's arts have changed. All of the art has changed. All of the art direction is completely different. 100% change in all of the art, from the font to the picture used. Completely different illustrator. Yes, this time the creator went and hired an artist, and one of the big complaints about the old cards was that they had a lot of AI art usage. That may matter to some people. To some people, it doesn't matter at all. The point that a lot of people make is, as long as the game system itself, or the homebrew overlay, or whatever it is, isn't utter rubbish, I'll play it. I'll give it a fair shake. But others don't want to support anything that's AI assisted. And I understand these viewpoints, and I'm not going to judge either of them here. But the creator did take note of those complaints and hired an artist. So if we flip these skill cards around, my main complaint was readability. So let's compare same card to same card. Both of these cards are Bash. The resource cost for the card is actually front and center rather than off to the side. It's much more readable. It's easier to see. The arrangement of the Bash base skill and modification text is more cleanly laid out. The overall art design for the card, I feel, is much better. I do kind of like the black text on the beige background rather than white on green, but that's a preference. Some of the lettering has actually been shrank in order to let the smaller descriptions have room to grow, but I don't think that a lot of the small descriptions did grow. I think that we had a lot of clarifications that were needed, and so because of that, more text had to be added to some of these fields, and as a result, the readability did suffer. However, this font is clearly larger than this font despite there being more text, so this did help the cards overall in their readability. And accessibility is an important thing for anybody who wants to try to market to the HeroQuest audience, because we're only getting older. I bought my first pair of cheaters a month ago. Cheaters. We're getting to that age where we're like, okay, I can almost read it. But if the text is too small, then we can't. You came here for fantasy, and I'm being too real. Let's go back to fantasy. Okay, here are the spell cards, and this is an interesting choice on spell and skill. We've got lowercase L's that look like eyes, and then uppercase L's at the end. Very interesting. It does kind of look like it says spell. All right, so let's compare spell cards with spell cards from the new edition of MEGAQuest. Sorry, I can't help myself. It's going to be the same kind of comparison, actually, because these are pretty much one for one the same as the ability cards, except we have our cost in magic over here, front dead center, and the icon that kind of tells you what type of magic it is, necromancy in this case, with it being a skull over here on the left. This icon of the skull is actually a lot harder to see than the old icon, and we can see that there is line spacing now, which might help some to read this, but the font is actually smaller. So it looks like we had some changes to the font that may have actually resulted in it being harder to read than before in some cases. But again, we have clarifications here. Things are just a little bit more explained. -1 defend if any target is damaged with this spell, the Brawn modification of Blood Siphon. Whereas on the new card, it says targets damaged by this spell have -1 defend until the start of the hero's next turn. So that is some much needed clarification. If we go to the mental modification, the old card says BP +2 instead of BP +1. The mental modification on the new card says heal +2 health instead of +1 health. Blood Siphon is essentially a healing spell. See references to BP being replaced with health. I think that that's pretty cool. It makes the system more its own. It makes it at least worth trying with other game systems to see if it does have some compatibility there. And lastly, and most significantly, let us compare the cards that represent the heroes. So I'd like to do a one-to-one comparison with a few of these. First of all, huge difference is the old art was, to some, fairly obviously AI. But aside from the character art, the actual blocks of information off to the right of the card, they have actually been shrank. They are significantly less wide. Now, if I put the edge of the information, not the actual margin of the black of the card, to the right here and line that up somewhat there, we've got about a 32nd, maybe a 16th of an inch. So pretty much the same, really insignificant amount. But coming over here to the left, this here, almost a 1/4 inch of information, very important real estate, has been shrank. We have our BP and mana, or probably health and mana in this case, for our hunter orc. That race and that class, the font has been changed, so we get a little bit more vertical real estate with this stuff. So actually we do have a taller space for our health and mana trackers. Our stat space is more attractive. It may look like we have less space, and I think technically in one dimension we do. In one axis here, we have less space, but that doesn't matter as much to me. The presentation is clearer, it's easier to see, it's prettier. The attack, defend, body, and mind, you might have to squint to see this stuff again, but it's better than it was. Same for discipline. The presentation, the clarity of the dots that we have to fill in versus the old card, much better. You know, looking at it like this, I don't think I realized, but the old card has a bit of a Windows 98 video game feel to it. Don't know how to explain it any better than that. The trait section is actually smaller. The font is smaller. The amount of space in which it is written is smaller. This is going to be a struggle for some people. The flavor text has been greatly enhanced. The odd thing about the old version is we have exactly one line of flavor text, and it is as small as it can be. That's like a size 2 font. And there is so much room in this box. But in the new box, we have a lot more text, and all of the space is being utilized. Okay, moving on to the shaman, we actually see the exact same thing here with the text that I was just talking about. One line of text, almost impossible to read. And yeah, I have to be harsh on it because it was really small. But the new one is quite readable. It's a lot bigger. It might still be a pretty small font for some players, depending on eyesight, but still a vast improvement over the old. We have more commissioned art rather than AI generative from the creator. And then it looks like, to me, this font is subject to change automatically in size depending on how much is typed into a specific field or box, sort of word wrapping and auto-sizing automatically, or the creator has sized it to fit a box. So we're going to get variable sizes of these fonts in the trait boxes. That's my design observation. It's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it could lead to better or worse design conventions depending on how you use it and how extreme you take that. So if you're making your own cards, your own abilities, your own stuff, and there's just too much text to fit in a space, it may be that the mechanic itself just needs to be changed so you can explain it better. Because at the end of the day, if you can't explain it very well to, say, a 6-year-old, then maybe it's too complicated. That's just a design convention on its own. It doesn't necessarily have to be followed, but it might be a good idea to look into something like that for all of you homebrew creators out there who want to distribute your stuff. Again, the Blade Ward Orc, we have a full body picture now, illustrated by an artist rather than generated, and the trait here is actually quite changed. Either it has been reduced mechanically or the actual trait itself is different. Let's check. Once per quest, you may pick a new weapon equipment card to be your sacred weapon if you don't already have one. And the new text rather says, once per quest, designate a weapon from your inventory as your sacred weapon. Only one sacred weapon allowed. So some of the mechanic is changed, but really it's just worded better. It's worded more concisely. I say changed, it probably isn't even changed. It's just the interpretation could be read differently because of how it was worded. And now it's clearer, it's more concise. I commend the creator for taking the time to make these a little bit easier to understand, less question about the intent. The path of Weapon Master, this text below the Weapon Master, absolutely torturous. On the new Blade Master, so some of the names have changed for these classes or these paths, we can actually read the text. And the trait has been greatly expanded upon. It is a little bit smaller, but it is a lot clearer. Now, I'm not going to say that every single line of text on these cards is going to be completely clear in terms of rules, in terms of mechanics. That's just something that's going to have people talking and questioning intent and stuff at any game table. We do that with the original HeroQuest and even with Avalon Hill's version now. You can strive for 100% and you might get there, but more often than not, some people are still going to have questions even after they read the rules, so I think it's just a normal thing. Now, that's about it for the comparison between the old and the new. I did have a bit of a discussion with the creator on these. I actually issued a bit of a challenge. I personally, and I don't want this to really affect your decision. You should be able to look at this and decide for yourself if this is worth even making any sort of decision over. But I personally think that the artist that the creator commissioned used AI to assist their artworks. There were a lot of tells in some of the images that I've seen, and I showed them to my wife, and not only did she agree with what I saw, she pointed out several more that would indicate that these were either made from an image that was generated and then edited, or it was an image that was put back through a generative AI such as Stable Diffusion. We kind of agreed that if it wasn't generative, then the artist just had a wildly inconsistent style. Just giving them the benefit of the doubt, a very inconsistent style in terms of clothing, in terms of anatomy, in terms of fantasy costume design choices. To this day, I remain unconvinced that there isn't a hand somewhere that is artificial intelligence. But that really is not of any import. That's not much of an issue if you don't think it's an issue. Some things that I prefer about the old cards, I actually prefer this light, very contrasted, readable back of the card on the old. On the new, though, the logo, the text is so much cooler looking. I don't know if it needed to be cooler looking. It's quite effective in its simplicity for the old, but the new is very cool. I don't think the font size and readability issue is completely fixed. I think that it was definitely helped. I think that there are definitely improvements, but I think that some of the improvements had to take a bit of a cut because of the clarity that some of these abilities needed. And I know the creator worked tirelessly to go through and revise every single one. But a second set of eyes is always going to point out something, and the third and fourth and fifth sets of eyes are going to be even more helpful. So them's just the breaks. At any rate, I think that MEGAQuest 2.0 is the version that you're going to get from now on, and I think the 1.0 version might be scrapped, which is great because this is an improvement. And who knows, maybe someday we'll get a MEGAQuest 3.0. So a huge thank you to Deathtone for sending me a deck of MEGAQuest 2.0 for review on the channel. And a huge thank you to everybody who has watched this and who have sponsored the video. And for those of you who would like to consider being sponsors, there's always links in the description below. If you have a physical component that you would like to send me for review on the channel, please feel free to reach out. My business email is always in the description below, or you can just message me on Discord. As always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, bye for now.